Great to have you on. It's a change time.
Great to be here, Tom.
If you were at a press conference after you released the minutes of the Fed or you raised the target interest rate, is that too much information to have a press conference?
I don't think so. I think it's a good move. In my experience, Tom, more transparency is always better than less. It's not as though this hasn't been tried elsewhere. Of course, they've been using it at the ECB, as you well know, for a long time, and I think it helps, especially when you have a chairman knowledgeable as Bernanke, of course, is. I think it may provide an additional nuance, a little more information, an opportunity for people to communicate to him through the media what their concern is so that he can address something that might not be addressed very explicitly in the statement itself.
When you look at this, my first reaction is we'll probably get more intelligent questions than we got from politicians not schooled in economics. That if the journalists are asking the questions, our Craig Torres, our Scott Landman, and others, we may get some good questions here. It could be a real benefit to get some immediate color on where we're going. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I do. Of course, he's going to, the challenge for the chairman, whether it's Chairman Bernanke or one of his successors down the road, is going to be to convey the sense of the committee as a whole. The sense of the committee is much more visible now than it was in the past, even back in my day. A decade or so ago, we were out there making speeches, but now these are covered by folks like you rigorously. So he's going to have the challenge of trying to, I think, in the conference to give a balanced response. I'm confident he can do it.
Let's get the first chart up here for Al Broaddus. Broaddus considers a QE2 free world. Here is a chart of the moment. This is what has Jeff Lacker concerned, Charles Plosser and others, this asset expansion at the Fed. Al Broaddus has taken another leg up recently here. Do you have confidence we can turn it around? And particularly, do you have confidence that the mechanisms are in place to bring the balance sheet down in a controlled manner?
I am, Tom. The short answer is yes. Obviously, this is the toughest time in the business cycle in many ways for the Fed. You have the economy, unemployment's, even though it's come down nicely and more rapidly than expected, you still have a lot of weakness in the economy, a lot of people out of work. It's not easy optically and politically to begin to move towards tightness, and that's the sort of judgment play that has to be made. But yeah, as far as the mechanics are concerned, yes, there are lots of things the Fed can do. We can talk about them if you want to in more detail, and they have already been preparing to do that with their repo test and so forth. I
like how you use the phrase optics, which goes to rules and discretion. Give us an update on where Al Broaddus is on this. What a huge debate. Do we need a rule with some squishiness around it, or do we need to go to something more firm?
Tom, I have always been a believer fundamentally in rules, I think in general, and I still do. I think my experience on the FOMC and as president of the Richmond Fed made me understand why discretionary decisions have to be made at some time. But I think rules are always good. In the current context, a rule that I'd like to see, I don't know it's a rule, but something certainly like a rule, would be an explicit inflation target. Charlie Plosser, in the speech he gave at the end of last week, reiterated his support of that. I know Jeff supports it, I believe, as well.
Right.
Something like that, I think, in this period when you're concerned about maybe inflation, at least temporarily, being a little too low, that would be something that would help the Fed maintain its longer-term anti-inflation credibility.
We've run charts here for both Europe and the United States looking at core inflation, simply saying where is the inflation, the worry out there of Plosser, Honig, and Lacker and others. Here's a chart. This is top-line inflation, headline inflation. This is the inflation that all of our viewers feel in the United States and, frankly, those commodity-based across the world. Inflation moves towards near normal. Al, we took it back to 1980. We see the Volcker miracle as we come down from 15% down to 3-4%, and some remarkable 20-year stability, and then this bout of deflation, and up we go. Do you have the concern about going up another 100 beeps from 2.1%, or are you genuinely concerned about a Heller-like inflation from the 60s?
I think that I don't have a chart in front of me here, Tom, but I think the great achievement of bringing the longer-term underlying trend rate of inflation down over the course of the 80s and 90s was terrific. It built a lot of credibility for the Fed for its longer-term effort to control inflation. It's not to say the risk isn't there. When you see a commodity price spike, and you've been focusing on this program, obviously that's a concern, and people look at that, and you know, we live in a fiat money system, if I can use a little technical jargon, a paper money system. So people naturally say, hey, is the Fed going to be able to sustain its anti-inflation moves in this kind of environment with this sort of thing going on? I think we can. I think we learned a lot from our I think we gained a lot from that experience, and I think we learned a lot, and I think we can. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's execution. Basketball season, it's execution at the end of the day.
Well, we won't ask you about VCU. That was painful. Al, when you look here at fiat money, and it's not Chrysler money, folks, it's money not backed by gold, are you suggesting that the Fed should look a little more at gold?
I don't know.
I want to get you in trouble today, Al.
I don't think that's a great indicator. Obviously, the Fed needs to look at anything that gives it some information about where inflation is going, but that would not be one of my first choices. You know, I still think core inflation is obviously a concept, Tom, that justifiably gets criticism. People say, hey, look, what about fuel and energy? You can't leave that out. But the way the Fed looks at that is as a leading indicator of the underlying trend. It's a better leading indicator of the underlying trend than the overall headline rate, and that's the focus. And we have the various measures of inflation expectations. You're well aware of them. All of those are the things where the focus needs to be, and I think everybody, whatever their point of view on this hawk-dove dichotomy may be, I think they know that's where they need to look.
We're going to come back with Al Broaddus. With us, folks, Al Broaddus, a former president of the Richmond Fed, 34 years with the institution. Al Broaddus, I want to go through some quick themes here. Marvin Goodfriend talking up a need for a new accord. Has the Fed independence been threatened, and do we need to reaffirm what McChesney Martin did in 1951?
I think the Fed's monetary policy independence is still quite strong. And I think Marvin would agree with that, but I agree very fully, and I was obviously working with Marvin at the Richmond Fed on this issue. His point of view is that the Fed's credibility and its independence can be challenged if the Fed is put in a position where it has to make decisions, often lending decisions to various institutions, that really are fiscal policy rather than monetary policy, or really inherently political in nature at the end of the day, Tom. And I think what Marvin would like is, and what I would like too, is something specific to protect the Fed from getting into that mire so that we can retain our monetary policy independence.
Jan Honsius and Zach Pandl, folks, it's a note today, a research note, a lot of good research over the weekend. This from Goldman Sachs. Fiscal retrenchment is a downside risk, a drag to growth outlook. They lowered their growth for the first quarter. It's also a downside risk to the interest rate outlook. Al Broaddus, what a fiscal mess. I mean, we showed a chart earlier, 14 trillion of debt out there, 95%. All of a sudden, we have monetary authorities being fiscal experts as well, don't we?
Well, we do. It's always a dangerous game to play. I guess it's a little less risky for me in that I'm no longer actually at the Fed, Tom. But I would just make this point. We do have a very severe fiscal challenge longer term, as you know. There are a couple of straws in the window. I think the proposal that the committee chairman Ryan has made, I'm not saying that I necessarily endorse that, but at least it's very forward-looking. I don't not endorse it either. I just think it's something that's worth studying. I think the Gang of Six, so-called Gang of Six, it includes former Virginia Senator Warner is also a sign that in the political environment in Washington, there now seems to be increasingly, at least some people, looking longer term at the kind of strategic things you need to do to get this thing fixed. And I think that's at least at the margin encouraging.
So you're suggesting as we go into the election cycle that this time is different and that we'll have a legitimate grown-up fiscal debate?
I'm hoping that's going to happen, Tom. I'm not going to predict that.
I got one final question. I had a chance to visit the Richmond Fed, and I got to eat in the fancy dining room you've got overlooking the river where the Confederacy escaped as the Union approached, and Jeff Lacker gave me a history lesson. Was the food as good and as fancy at the Richmond Fed when you were there, or did Jeff Lacker do that?
I don't know. I've always thought it was very good. I have very plain taste in food myself, Tom, to be honest, and I was always perfectly satisfied with what we have. I haven't eaten at the bank lately, so I better not comment.
Well, invite yourself over for the crab cakes. Emily and I canceled our airplane to stay there longer just to get through the fancy lunch at the top.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm delighted you liked it.
Good, we did, Al. Thank you so much. Al Broaddus, a former president of the Richmond Fed.